Hi class! Today I want to talk about restrictive dieting. I have my whiteboard just in case I need to draw pictures, because occasionally I do as I talk about this. I want to talk about the concept of calorie counting. This is one of the most common ways that people try to lose weight. And the math behind it is really quite solid. We talk about 1 pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. And you have all probably seen the basic equation of calories in minus calories out. And this X that you're trying to get to is how you're going to lose weight. So for instance, if you take 2,000 calories in and you burn 2,500 in a day, you're in a deficit of 500 calories. If you're in a deficit of 500 calories for 7 days, you lose 1 pound of fat. So we try to make this a mathematical equation, but nutrition doesn't work with math, even though we try to do this. So I want to break this down a little bit. Why doesn't this work? Because it is one of the most common methods. In fact, as you read all the nutrition advice for this week's reading from the USDA, you'll see that their common approach is just have good nutrition, count your calories, you'll be good. So let's talk calories in, first of all. All of you have probably had the experience, whether with dieting or taking a nutrition class or for some other reason, of actually calculating how many calories you're taking in. One of the hardest things about this approach is that it's really difficult to catch all the little calories that may come in. So people very often miss things like ketchup or maple syrup or mayo. And even if they get them, what is the likelihood that you're going to measure out that mayo before you put it on your bread to make a sandwich? So people don't get those little things often enough. If you're cooking, it becomes really difficult. How many calories do you have in a dish that you made from home versus eating processed food? We know cooking is healthier for you, but processed foods actually make it easier in calorie counting. So a lot of people who are calorie counting actually go straight for processed food, which is less healthy for them. The other problem you have is unless you have a scale, which a lot of people do, a lot of people have a kitchen scale and weigh out their food, even then you could be wrong. So if you're measuring, let's say you want to measure a cup of Raisin Bran. Raisin Bran's my favorite example. You could measure a cup of Raisin Bran, and yet the calories in every cup of Raisin Bran is not going to be exact. You're going to have a few more raisins in one cup than you would have in another one, and that's obviously going to change your density. Even if you measure it with a scale and you're trying to get exactly 50 grams or whatever the serving size is, you're still going to have issues with making sure you have the right proportion of flakes to raisins as what they measured in the labs. So you could be off just a little bit there. If you go to fast food restaurants, they may tell you this is how many calories are in this dish, and yet a lot of them are just approximations. So I always think of Cafe Rio. If you go in, you get a scoop of rice. Is every scoop of rice the same size? So how do you know how many calories are in that scoop of rice? Or a McDonald's ice cream cone. You've probably all had the experience, whether McDonald's or somewhere else, where you get an ice cream cone and it may be huge or it may be little, or just depends on who's making that ice cream cone. Now you're probably thinking you're getting way too fussy for calorie counting. It's just a good idea. And I do agree that it's good to know about how much you're eating. A lot of people are eating way more than they think they are. But here's where it matters. We have 100 calorie mindless margin that we talk about. 100 calories. Either way, it's super easy to go 100 calories over, 100 calories under. 100 calories over where your body is that homeostasis where you maintain weight. 100 calories a day, not much, like less than a piece of bread a day, adds up to 10 to 12 pounds a year. So even though you're saying the mayo doesn't matter, if I get a few extra raisins, oh well, an extra scoop of ice cream, oh well, unless it's 10 to 12 pounds a year, which is actually what Americans are gaining. That's where our increase is people are gaining. They're not gaining 50 pounds in a year by and large. They're gaining a little bit every year, which is leading to obesity issues in this country. So in terms of calories in, even though it seems like it should be easy to measure, it's actually much more difficult than we think it is. Calories out is worse. Because do you know how much you actually burn in everyday activity? So as you're walking around the house, doing laundry, or walking the dog, do you actually know how many calories you're burning? Walking across campus, up the stairs, you don't really know. That's physical activity. So the first, if we try and look at what is going to be in this calories out, The first one is going to be physical activity. Now, physical activity is not the same as exercise. Physical activity is just the everyday type of things. So if I'm looking at calories out, this is my physical activity. I may be bending over to pick up laundry. That's physical activity. And it's really hard to say how many calories you're burning in that physical activity. The next one is exercise. I know you have watches and apps and everything that tells you how many calories you burn exercising, but they're all approximations. They're not exact. So it may say you may have 2 different apps that say different amounts of calories that you've burned through exercise. The next one is your basal metabolic rate. This is what we talk about as your metabolism. This metabolism is going to be influenced by a lot of things. Genetics are a big one. You know, people who have a really high metabolism, they can eat anything they want and it doesn't seem to affect them. It's going to be influenced by gender. Women get the short end of the stick here, so their basal metabolic rate is going to be lower. It's going to be influenced by muscle mass. So those who have more muscle actually burn more every day than those who have less muscle, which is interesting because I usually hear women talk about how they want to do all cardio to burn calories, but muscle is actually going to get your metabolism up more. It's influenced by sleep. If you get enough sleep, your metabolism is better. It's influenced by water, how much water consumption you drink. Your metabolism works harder when you're drinking more water. So there's a lot of influencing factors to that metabolism, and that metabolism can be slightly altered over time because the big one is dieting, and we'll come back to that. Dieting is going to lower your metabolism, which is where your metabolism may be lower for a while. Okay, and then the other one is the thermic effect of food. This is how many calories does it take to burn the food you eat. You probably don't think about that. But if you're eating celery, there's actually a lot of work for your body to break apart those fibrous strands into single cells. And so that's why it is burning more than is actually in the celery. If you've ever heard dieters talk about celery as a 0-calorie food, that's why. So all of these are approximations of how many calories you burn. And we don't have a good idea. You may have textbooks that are going to estimate your basal metabolic rate, but most of you don't know what that is unless you go get it tested in a lab. And that would be the number of calories that you need if you are in the hospital, not moving at all, not doing anything else. How many calories do you need to pump your heart and to make your brain work? That's your basal metabolic rate. So as we look at this equation, calories in versus calories out, you can see how problematic it can be. Let's also talk about the idea of dieting and affecting your basal metabolic rate. So what we see happen, somebody decides they want to lose weight and they lower their calorie intake and their weight goes down. What they don't see happening is that their basal metabolic rate decreases. So maybe right here they were eating 2,000 calories, and as they start to diet, their body says, whoa, we've got to do more with less. The human body is amazing. So maybe now it's saying we're going to burn 1,900 calories a day. And you're eating 1,200 calories a day, so you're still losing weight. But when you start eating again, your body doesn't know, hey, by the way, this diet is over, go back to 2,000 calories. No, it is programmed through years of starvation, famine, and then excess to say, oh, now we're eating again, store it all on. That basal metabolic rate does not pop right back up, which is where people usually gain more weight. So we see this cycle that kind of looks like this over time. And you probably know dieters in this world where they've dieted their whole life and they keep getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And part of that is because that basal metabolic rate maybe goes down here even more and down here and even lower. So their metabolism goes lower and lower and lower the more they diet. And so it's harder and harder for them to be able to lose weight. That's part of that basal metabolic rate. When we look at the commercial weight loss industry, this week I have you doing papers on the commercial weight loss industry. In class, we typically divide them into a couple of categories. The first one is deprivation-based. Deprivation means you're not allowed to eat something or the amount you want. So either you can't eat fruit, or you can only eat 1,200 calories, or you have to eat at certain times of day or in certain weird combinations, or only their food. Most of our diets are deprivation-based. The second category is absorption. There are some diets that are going to affect the absorption of foods, And so you may not absorb them as well. My favorite is the tapeworm diet. It's going to affect the absorption of the food, so you don't actually absorb the food. Don't try it. It's not worth it. The last one is chemical. And usually with chemical, we are talking about some of your diet pill categories, your Hydroxycut, your green tea diets. And some of them have safer chemicals. Some of them have more problematic chemicals. One of the things to keep in mind is they're not widely regulated by the FDA. So most of your diet programs or products are not regulated by the FDA, which means you don't even know what you're getting in them. This primarily is caffeine, as a side note. So most of our diet pills are just chock full of caffeine, which makes it kind of an upper. But if you've ever had a lot of caffeine, you know that if you don't have caffeine, you crash, and it doesn't work long term. So you can't just keep taking more and more and more and more caffeine and make it work long term. You're not going to have the same rush. The other thing I want you to know about the dieting industry is that we keep reinventing the wheel. So when we talk about deprivation-based diets, right now we're talking about keto. Everybody's talking about keto, which is high fat, low protein, medium protein, low carb, which is similar to Atkins, which was high protein, moderate fat, low carb, which is similar to Whole30, which is only eating certain foods. Paleo is not terribly different. So all of these diets, they're recycled. So when I very first started teaching, it was Atkins that everybody was on. And I'd ask the class, how many of you knew somebody on Atkins? And every hand would go up. How many of them have lost weight on Atkins? Every hand goes up. How many of them have kept it off? Most hands are up. And as we went through the next year, fewer hands of how many kept it off, to the point where nobody had their hand up that they had kept it off long term. We saw that. We saw this cycle. Everybody on Atkins, they lost a lot of weight. They gained it back by and large because they can't sustain it. Then we saw them all move to HCG. That was all the craze for a while. Same exact cycle that went through. Now we're on to keto. Here we go. Everybody's on keto, losing weight. They're all going to gain it back. I've seen this enough times to tell you exactly what's going to happen. They're going to gain the weight back. Then we're going to recycle some diet that we already have that's just a minor change from what we've already done. And everybody's going to talk about it. It's all the rage. Everybody's losing weight. You should do it. And it's not going to work. My best advice that I can give you is if you can't do it for the rest of your life, don't bother. It's not going to work unless you can do it long term. So if you have to change your diet and only eat 5 foods, you're not going to be able to do that the rest of your life. And it's not going to work because the weight's going to come back in that yo-yo cycle that we just talked about. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these dieting industries a lot of these dieting programs are coming out of MLMs, multi-level marketing. So we have lots of health coaches or nutrition specialists who have no degrees in health or nutrition, but what they're doing is they're being paid to market these products so that they can make money. And so it's a little bit scary when you look at their health credentials or lack thereof, when they're telling you should be on all of these different programs. It's an MLM to suck people in, get them to then sell the program, and then they can all make money. It's not quite a pyramid scheme, though it does kind of seem like that. So always watch out for the MLMs that are weight loss oriented. We've seen a ton of them lately. Your Isagenix, the body wraps were a few years ago. Shakeology is in there as well. So look for any MLM where they want you to be a rep in order to sell their product. That's pretty much it for restrictive dieting. As we talk about the dieting industry, we're going to get in and talk about how the results are actually terrible with the dieting industry. But I wanted you to have a basis of why calorie counting doesn't work, because I think that that's the one that's promoted mostly in public health, and yet it does not have the scientific evidence to say it's useful in long-term management of weight. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.